The night air was thick with tension, the kind that wrapped around the bones and squeezed like a vice. "Step out of the car! Now!" Officer Liam Parker's voice cut through the stillness of the parking lot, sharp and commanding, a whip crack in the silence. Across from him stood Evelyn Moore. She didn't flinch. Dressed in plain clothes, her posture was steady, exuding an authority that contradicted her casual appearance. The unmarked patrol car beside her bore no signs of distinction, but her presence alone carried a weight that should have warned him to tread carefully. "I'm authorized to be here," she said, her voice calm, controlled. But Parker wasn't listening. His hand hovered over his holster, fingers twitching against the leather, a silent threat hanging between them. "Don't argue with me," he snapped. "Step back or I'll make you." The hostility in his voice clung to the air, thick and suffocating, pressing against Evelyn like an insult meant to bruise. Slowly she raised a hand, a peace offering, a chance for him to reconsider. "You don't want to do this," she said, voice even. "Just let me—" But Parker moved first, quick, aggressive. His hand shoved her hard against the car, the sudden impact rattling through her bones. "People like you don't belong here," he sneered. Evelyn's breath hitched. She wasn't unfamiliar with those words. They burned hotter than the dull ache in her back as she pushed herself upright, dusting the grit off her jacket. She looked him in the eye. "What did you just say?" Her voice was steady, but inside something ignited, something raw, something old. "I said you don't belong here." His sneer was dripping with something more than arrogance. Something ugly, something rotten. "Now leave before I have to call backup." There it was, that smug certainty, the unchecked belief that his authority was absolute, unshakable. But Evelyn did something then, something that made the blood drain from his face. She reached into her pocket. Parker stiffened. His hand flew toward his gun, his instincts primed for confrontation. But what she pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was something far worse for him, her badge. The polished emblem caught the dim glow of the streetlights, gleaming with an unspoken finality. Chief of Police. For a moment, Parker couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the weight of what he had just done. Evelyn stepped forward, closing the space between them, her voice calm, but this time, there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. "Let me explain something to you," she said. "I don't answer to you. In fact, you answer to me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Parker opened his mouth, but no words came. His arrogance had turned to ash in his throat, his confidence collapsing under the weight of his own recklessness. Evelyn didn't look away. "Do you even know who I am?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to carve through his last remnants of certainty. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" He tried to speak, tried to grasp for an excuse, a defense, something, but there was nothing. Just the slow, dawning horror of a man realizing the ground beneath him had disappeared. What happened that night would set off a chain reaction neither of them could have foreseen. The power he had wielded so carelessly, the humiliation he had inflicted without hesitation, it was all about to come crashing down. But not in the way anyone expected. The precinct was unnervingly quiet the morning after the incident. It wasn't the usual morning lull, where officers sipped stale coffee and swapped half-hearted greetings. No, this silence was different. It was thick, heavy with unspoken tension, the kind that curled around the edges of the department like an approaching storm. In her office, Evelyn Moore sat with her fingers pressed against her temples, staring down at the internal affairs report she had demanded. Sleep had been a stranger to her the night before. Every detail of Parker's arrogance replayed in her mind like a broken reel, each moment sharper, more infuriating than the last. The quiet creak of her office door pulled her from her thoughts. Deputy Chief Nathan Martinez stepped inside, his face etched with concern. "Chief," he said carefully, his voice low, "we've got a situation brewing." Evelyn exhaled slowly, already knowing what was coming. "Parker knows what's coming," Nathan continued. "He's already talking to some of the officers in his circle, trying to rally support." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Support for what?" she asked. "He violated every protocol in the book. There's no defense for what he did." Nathan hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "It's not about defense," he admitted. "It's about loyalty. Some of the old guard, they don't see you as one of them. They're going to frame this as you being too harsh, too political." A smirk ghosted across Evelyn's lips, but there was no humor in it. "Too harsh?" she repeated, her voice edged with disbelief. "He assaulted his superior officer without cause. If I were a man, they'd be falling over themselves to condemn him." Her eyes darkened. "This isn't about loyalty, Nathan. It's about fear of change." Nathan nodded but didn't argue. She was right. They both knew it. "The review panel meets in 3 days," he reminded her. "Do you want me to take the lead on this?" Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "This is mine to handle. Parker needs to understand that actions have consequences, not just for him, but for everyone who thinks they can operate above the rules." Across the precinct, in the locker room, Parker paced like a caged animal. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. Nearby, a few officers lingered, their faces tense. Some conflicted, others complicit. Ben Carver, one of Parker's closest allies, leaned against a bench, watching him carefully. "You're blowing this out of proportion," Ben said, trying to sound reassuring. "It's not like you knew she was the chief." Parker spun around, eyes blazing. "That's not the point," he snapped. "She's going to make an example out of me. Do you have any idea what that'll do to my career? My pension?" Ben shrugged. "Maybe just apologize," he offered. "Say it was a misunderstanding. That usually works." Parker's nostrils flared. "You think this is about an apology?" His voice dropped, but the anger in it crackled like fire. "She wants to humiliate me. I'm not going to let her win." Back in her office, Evelyn stared at the footage from the parking lot. The damning evidence played before her eyes. Parker's aggressive stance, his refusal to listen, the forceful shove. But what stuck with her wasn't just the act itself. It was the look in his eyes. Not respect, not even caution. Disdain. A sharp knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Nathan again. But this time, he looked more troubled. "There's chatter," he said. "Parker's talking about filing a grievance." Evelyn folded her arms. "On what grounds?" Nathan hesitated. "He's saying you're targeting him because of—" he exhaled. "Because of race." Evelyn's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, disgust, exhaustion, maybe both. "He's pulling that card?" she asked. Nathan nodded grimly. "It's desperate," he admitted, "but it might stick with some of the guys who already don't like how you're running things." Evelyn let out a slow breath, then straightened. "Let him," she said simply. "Let him dig himself deeper. The facts are on my side. The footage doesn't lie. If he wants to turn this into a public spectacle—" She met Nathan's gaze. "I'll be ready." But the public spectacle had already begun. By the next day, whispers about the incident had spread beyond the department. Union representatives were asking questions. Some officers were visibly choosing sides. Evelyn didn't flinch. That evening, she stepped onto the main floor of the precinct. Conversations hushed as she approached. The weight of every pair of eyes fell on her, but she carried it like armor. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I'm sure you've all heard about the incident in the parking lot," she began. Her tone was steady, firm. I won't go into details because this matter is under review, but let me make one thing very clear. She let her gaze sweep across the room. Accountability applies to everyone, no matter their rank, no matter their tenure, no matter their reputation. Our job is to serve and protect, and that starts with respect for each other and for the community we serve. If anyone has an issue with that, my office door's open. Silence. Then a slow shifting of weight, the sound of throats clearing. At the back of the room, Parker stood rigid, his jaw clenched. Later, Ben approached him again, his voice quieter this time. "She's not backing down, Parker," he muttered. "Maybe you should—" "No." Parker's voice was low, seething. "She wants to humiliate me. I'm not going to let her win." But Parker didn't understand. Evelyn wasn't interested in humiliating him. She was interested in exposing him. Not just him, all of them. The culture that let men like Parker thrive unchecked. The silent nods, the whispered agreements, the unchallenged abuse of power. She wanted it dragged into the light. And as the days passed, she began to see just how deep the rot went. The review panel convened in a tense, crowded room. Evelyn sat at one end of the table, her posture composed but unyielding. Parker sat at the other, flanked by his union representative. The proceedings were grueling. Parker's defense wove half-truths and misdirection, grasping at anything to shift blame. Evelyn didn't falter. She presented the footage, the reports, the testimonies from officers who had witnessed Parker's behavior firsthand. And when she spoke, her voice didn't waver. "This isn't about me," she said, "or about Parker. This is about what kind of department we want to be. Do we want to uphold the values we claim to stand for? Or do we want to protect those who tarnish them?" Silence. The weight of her words sank in, but the fight was far from over. In the days that followed, the fallout was impossible to ignore. Parker's supporters grew quieter as more evidence surfaced. And Evelyn? She kept pushing for reform, knowing the road ahead would be long, fraught with resistance. But as she stood in her office one evening, looking out over the city, she allowed herself a rare moment of hope. The truth was out. The battle was far from over. But for the first time, the path forward was finally within reach.